Hello, I'm Dr. Michelle Colby, one of the NIFA National Program Leaders supporting the Veterinary Medicine Loan Repayment Program. Thank you for taking the time to view our webinar on how to fill out the Veterinary Shortage Situation Nomination Form. If you have any questions as I go through the material, we provide contact information at the end of the presentation so you can reach out with your questions after viewing. In accordance with federal civil rights law and U.S. Department of Agriculture civil rights regulations and policies, the USDA, its agencies, offices, and employees and institutions participating in or administering USDA programs are prohibited from discriminating based on race, color, national origin, religion, sex, gender identity, including gender expression, sexual orientation, disability, age, marital status, family parental status, income derived from a public assistance program, political beliefs, or reprisal or retaliation for prior civil rights activity in any program or activity conducted or funded by USDA. Remedies and compliant filing deadlines vary by program or incident. This slide contains contact information for individuals with disabilities to request reasonable accommodation to participate in or apply to our programs. This includes language access service for limited English proficient individuals upon request. Anyone wishing to file a complaint can utilize the phone number, fax number, or postal mailing address listed on the slide. Before completing the nomination form, first determine the maximum number of veterinary shortage situations for each fiscal year indicated on the maximum nomination allocation table as referenced in the VMLRP Veterinary Shortage Situation Nomination Overview webinar. We recommend that submitting officials consult with food animal producer groups or associations, their state veterinary medical associations, or other officials and stakeholders in a potential shortage situation area to verify a genuine need. When preparing the nominations, please include both quantitative data such as number of farms and number of animals compared to veterinarians serving in the area, as well as qualitative data such as stakeholder remarks on the need to recruit or retain a veterinarian. We will now transition to the portion of this webinar where we will review how to complete the nomination form and what to include in each section. The first two fields to fill out on the nomination form are the location and center of the shortage area. In the location of veterinary shortage field, enter the names of one or more contiguous counties. The area must constitute a logistically plausible service area that a single veterinarian could be expected to cover and serve effectively. If your intent is for the veterinarian to provide most of their services in one county, but they can provide services in neighboring contiguous counties, you can list the primary county and then list those surrounding counties. For example, Stearns and the surrounding counties of Stool and Meeker. We do ask SAHOs to carefully consider the geography when defining a shortage area. Specifically, we suggest that you do not include the following in the description of the location: an area that is too large for a single veterinarian to cover, multiple shortage nominations with overlapping counties, which can create competition for clientele within the areas, or modifiers such as districts, entire state, or interpretive statements with a number-mile radius. For example, 40-mile radius within counties X, Y, and Z, District 9, or anywhere in state X. For Type 3 positions, the state can be listed if the services are to be provided for the entire state. If listing a district or regional position within that state, a list of the contiguous counties must follow to easily identify such counties. For the approximate center of shortage area, enter an address, cross street, or combination of geo-coordinates that approximates the center of the service area for Type 1 or Type 2 shortage nominations. For Type 2 nominations, enter the business address of the primary office where the position would be located. Do not repeat the list of counties from the location of veterinary shortage in this section. In either private practice or public service, the location must include geographically relevant text. It must be easily identifiable when reviewing a map of the counties of that state. Please ensure all location information is accurate, as NIFA uses this information to map the shortage locations. The next section on the nomination form is priority. Congressional intent for the VMLRP is to incentivize applicants to serve in veterinary shortage situation areas with the greatest need. Nominations are prioritized to facilitate the process and assist panelists in their review of shortage nominations and ranking of applicants. Keep in mind that whatever priority you select, you must justify in the nomination form in the fourth short answer response on the second page. You will need to clearly describe the consequences of not addressing the veterinary shortage situation area. For all priority classifications, you must make a unique case based on other situation-specific risk criteria to justify the prioritization. Characterize each shortage nomination as moderate priority, high priority, or critical priority shortage as defined on this slide. Moderate priority is an area lacking in some aspect of food supply veterinary services, justified by the absence of or insufficient access to veterinary services needed for basic animal health, animal well-being, production profitability, food safety, or public health. High priority is an area lacking in sufficient access to food supply veterinary services, justified by meeting the criteria for moderate priority status, plus any additional concerns relating to food supply veterinary medicine and/or public health. Examples include areas with especially large census of food animals in comparison to available veterinary services, or special animal or public health threats unique to the area. For example, recent or ongoing disease outbreak of high consequence or reportable endemic animal and zoonotic diseases. Critical priority is an area severely lacking in some aspect of food supply or public health related veterinary services. This is justified by meeting the criteria for moderate and/or high priority status, plus any additional serious concerns relating to the roles of food supply veterinarians play in protecting animal and public health. Examples include areas with especially high potential for natural disasters or incursions of foreign animal diseases. For example, high throughput international animal importation sites or proximity to international borders where wildlife and food animal species readily cross. The next section of the form is where you select the type of shortage area. These options are Type 1, which is at least 80% full-time equivalent or FTE, which is 32 hours a week of private practice food supply veterinary medicine in either a rural or urban area. Type 2 is at least 30% full-time equivalent or 12 hours a week in a private food animal medicine practice. Type 2 shortage areas must be considered rural areas. Type 3 is at least 49% full-time equivalent or 19.6 hours a week in public practice. After defining the type of shortage, for types 1 and 2 shortages, we ask that you indicate which food animal species must be covered by a veterinarian selected to fill the shortage and which food animal species may be utilized to meet the required hours to fulfill the service commitment. The indication of must cover or may cover food animal species to be served are only for type 1 and type 2 nominations. Any single species type may be indicated under either must cover or may cover, but not both. The other category is an opportunity to add food animal agricultural species that are not already listed. For example, other species not listed sometimes include apiary, aquaculture, equine supporting beef operations, or other farm-related activities, and could include farm animals for services that support agricultural activities or service animals in preparation of crops. Must-cover species or other agricultural species are those animals a veterinarian is required to be prepared, willing, and committed to provide services towards these species. Consider carefully which are the most critical must-serve species in each shortage area, so those with the relevant skills will feel the application is an option versus an insurmountable hurdle for them by selecting every single species. The selection of more than one must-cover species will indicate during the application review to the panel that a veterinarian is required to have experience with all species selected. Each must-cover species selected requires consistent activities and services for those selected species. Selecting the most critical species allows applicants to better showcase their skills, education, and experience for serving the most critical species in that area. The priority and majority of the service time is the intent to service the must-cover species. Keep in mind that at least 50% of an awardee's full-time equivalent can go towards the must-serve species. May cover species or other agricultural species are those animals a veterinarian may provide services for to meet the required % full-time equivalent. This recognizes that not all food animal species require the same level of service in a shortage area year-round, and a veterinarian may need the flexibility to provide services to other species during the off-season to meet their % full-time equivalent. When a veterinarian is unable to fulfill the service obligation with must-cover species, then it is appropriate to focus on may-cover species to fulfill the service obligation. For example, to support beef operations during the off-season, equine may be listed in other as a may-cover species. If you select or list a species in this section, then you have determined that there is a shortage for this type of work and the applicant can claim that service time. The justification for such a species will need to be made on page 2 of the form. For Type 3 positions, the next section involves information on employer and position title. Only one position can be listed per Type 3 nomination. Food safety, public health, and epidemiology are listed as primary disciplines. If the position requires a specialty or discipline that is not listed, then select other to write in the specialty disciplinary area required. Select as many specialties or disciplines that may apply to that position. Note that only one specialty or disciplinary area can be listed as other. A microbiologist and field officer cannot be requested within the same nomination unless their duties are the same. The only difference is that the title of the position, and it would need to be made clear within the description of the objective on page 2 of the form. For example, at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, an epidemiologist position can often be filled by a health scientist, a medical officer, or a veterinary medical officer. The degree is what determines the title, but the job is the same. Our reviewers seek to match the best applicant with the position. Thus, if the position is written with more than one job description, reviewers cannot compare each position for a match. This could lead to two people being the best match for two different positions with only one shortage. There are situations where the same job can be done with the same employer and the position be split equally between federal and state or agriculture and health departments. If this situation occurs, please contact the program staff. The next section on the form is the % full-time equivalent, or FTE. The shortage type, 1, 2, or 3, will determine the minimum full-time equivalent requirement. The box at the bottom of page 1 on the form is optional for requiring a higher percentage than the minimum full-time equivalent. If a greater FTE is required to mitigate the shortage area, then the higher percentage must be entered into the optional box at the bottom of the page. The minimum FTE requirement can be increased based on the objectives and need of the area described. The minimum FTE is already specified on the form and does not need to be filled in the optional box. If this field is left blank, the minimum requirement will apply. The FTE can be as high as 100% if the requirements are realistic and economically feasible to meet the service needs. The program requires that an awardee fulfill their obligation for the number of hours contracted within each quarter. This means that although an awardee may take leave and the veterinarian's employer may provide paid leave, the VMLRP still expects an awardee to fully execute all required hours per quarter. When determining the % FTE, consider the following based on the objectives and services described on page 2 of the form. In reviewing the targeted species and service area, how long will it take to drive if the practice was situated in the center? What are the square miles of the area and number of animals to be served? How many farms, ranches, or other facilities related to food animal production are available for the practitioner to serve? How much time will be allocated to cover this area? What is the level of priority? Would it be a concern if there was a disease outbreak or a large morbidity or mortality event within a large population of food animal species? For Type 3 positions, FTE time can vary based on the work schedule of the position. For example, if the position requires a 30-hour per week maximum, then 100% FTE with the VMLRP program would not be accurate or feasible, as 100% FTE is defined as a 40-hour work week. A 30-hour work week would equate to 75% FTE, and that would not account for any vacation. Also estimate vacation, sick, and/or holiday time when determining the FTE. Many positions in public and private practice are granted paid leave, such as for holidays, annual, or sick leave. Calculations of FTE should allow for this leave. For example, for a recommended 85% FTE, this would translate to a 34-hour work week, and with drive time, 25.5 hours of on-farm time. Diversity of business needs may vary for practitioner. A higher FTE will be dependent upon a consistent source of income from producers within a shortage area, which could be burdensome for a practitioner who may struggle with meeting service hours based on solely food supply animal work. I have a couple of examples on this slide. Each awarded participant has a percent FTE requirement to meet each quarter. The full-time equivalent percent is based on a 40-hour work week. Table 1 is an example of 50% full-time equivalent contract time commitment, which translates to 20 hours per week. Although the time requirement meets a type 2 or 3, the calculations to determine the number of hours for each quarter is the same for all types. Each quarter calculation within each calendar year is based on the number of eligible working days. Hence, each quarter may vary on hours for each calendar year. For type 3s, there are circumstances that are different since positions can be local, state, or federal government positions. Employment restrictions due to budget or position requirements may fluctuate a position's working hours. The MLRP calculates its FTE based on a 40-hour work week, which is 100%. An employee who works at 35 hours per week would never be able to execute 100% FTE VMLRP contract requirement, as they are prohibited from working 40 hours, a 40-hour work week within their position. Vacation and sick leave also need to be considered. For example, in Table 2, an employee's time requirement may be 35 hours per week. A 40-hour work week equals 2,080 hours in a year. A 30-hour per week employee would have only 1,820 hours in a year. Then you also have to consider holidays, required vacation, and eligible sick days. If the employee has 14 holidays, 15 sick days, and 12 vacation days, that totals 388 hours. That employee's hours then total 1,432 employable hours in a year. If you take that amount and divide it by the 40 hours per week calculation and multiply it by 100%, that equals a maximum of 68% for this position. You do not have to use this exact calculation when setting your FTEs, but we do want to make sure that you are aware of the potential restrictions on an individual's time and the need to account for time for vacation and sick leave. In the short answer section of the nomination form, Box 1 asks you to describe the importance and objectives of a veterinarian filling this shortage situation, as well as being located in the community, area, state insular area, or position requested on page 1. Clearly describe the specific objectives the state hopes to achieve by incentivizing a veterinarian to serve in a nominated situation area or to retain a veterinarian to stay serving in an area, and the measure awardees and NIFA could use to assess success. Include quantitative data such as the number of animals versus veterinarians available, number of veterinarians needed to mitigate the shortage, size of the location in square miles, and qualitative data such as economic importance, stakeholder testimonials, advertisements of awards and benefits to the area, and attractions to the state or region. Emphasis should be on must-cover species, but you can also mention may-cover species. Box 2 asks you to describe the activities of a veterinarian meeting this shortage situation. This section assists the applicant in understanding what is expected of them to serve the area and is critical information in developing their application materials. There is a need for the applicant to work, if there is a need for the applicant to work at a sale barn or provide another specific service in the shortage area, it should be stated here. This also includes addressing trick testing programs, biosecurity, artificial insemination or embryo transfer, continuing education, outreach activities, or cooperating with a university extension program. It is essential for the information on the nomination form to be clear and consistent when describing the activities and services for the species to be served. Also include outreach activities that you would like to see an awardee be involved in, such as communication with producers and organizations such as 4-H or FFA, and telehealth services. This description will allow the awardee to determine which methods of communications are most impactful, including meetings and presentations, publications, brochures, newsletters, blogs, video logs, podcasts, etc. Also consider seasonality and slow times of the production year with specific species and list activities an awardee might consider doing during these times. Box 3 asks you to describe any past efforts to recruit and retain a veterinarian in the shortage situation. Explain each prior effort to mitigate this veterinary service shortage and prospects for recruiting or retaining veterinarians in the future. Describe the number of years the position has been vacant where recruitment and retention advertisements have been made. For Type 3 nominations, especially federal, also address the availability of other loan repayment programs if those have already been maxed out, and if not, why not? Box 4 asks you to describe the risk of this veterinarian position not being secured or retained. Explain the consequences of not addressing this veterinary shortage situation as it pertains to a safe food supply and to animal, human, and environmental health from locally to internationally if a veterinarian is not secured or retained. This section supports the priority level indicated on the first page of the nomination form that we discussed earlier. The last step for completing the shortage nomination form is to check the 2 affirmation boxes. The first affirmation indicates that you understand the NIFA review process of your shortage nominations, which I will address shortly, and the second affirmation assures that the shortage situation is legitimate and that diligent efforts were made to identify the need of the shortage area. Next, you will provide contact information, including name, title, organization, email, and telephone number, area code required, of the authorized state or insular area animal health official. Please ensure that the email and telephone number are accurate. This information is available on the Veterinary Shortages Situations map of our NIFA's website, and the potential applicants and awardees may use this contact information to seek further information regarding the details of the nomination. Once the form is completed, perform a final review of the form to ensure all fields are filled out correctly and properly and with the correct information. This is a public-facing document, so please check for spelling and grammar errors. There have been situations in the past where those submitting multiple shortage nominations have mixed information pertaining to different shortage nomination areas. For example, using the same exact information from the National Agricultural Statistics Service for multiple nominations. Data should be specific to each nomination. After you have confirmed that all necessary fields are filled out, you will need to save the completed form as a PDF. To submit your nominations, you will send one email with all shortage nominations attached as PDFs to vmlrp.applications@usda.gov. Please do not send each nomination form individually. And lastly, all completed forms must be received by the deadline, which is updated each year on the VMLRP News and Timeline webpage. Few notes about the nomination review process. There are 3 steps to our review process. First, our team will conduct an administrative review of the submitted nominations to ensure all fields are complete and correctly filled. Any nomination requiring correction will be returned to the submitting official with specific instructions for correction. Unfortunately, NIFA staff cannot make any changes to your submitted nomination form on your behalf, even if it is simply checking a box. Next, we will conduct a non-competitive merit review with a panel of food animal experts. All new nominations will be reviewed by the panel. NIFA intends to accept all nominations submitted. However, each new nomination will be reviewed by the panel and categorized as either recommended or recommended with resolution. Nominations recommended will not need edits. For nominations that are categorized as recommended with resolution, those will be returned to the submitting official with feedback, including specific instructions for correcting all incomplete components identified by the panel. Submitting officials will have 1 week to make corrections. Once the recommendations are adjusted by the state animal health official, NIFA staff will review the nomination form for completeness and final approval. Thank you again for viewing the VMLRP Veterinary Shortage Situation Nomination Form Completion webinar today. If you have any questions, please reach out to NIFA staff at vmlrp.applications@usda.gov.